Captain Wu Jin stood on the bridge of his massive warship called the Dreadnought Crusher and looked out at the stars through the big viewing window. His purple scales caught the bright lights from the control panels and made him look even more scary than usual. The ship was huge, like a floating city in space, with thousands of rooms and corridors that went on for miles. The captain was proud of his ship and his crew. They had defeated many planets and captured millions of aliens from different worlds. His soldiers were the best fighters in the galaxy. They were tall and strong, with thick armor that grew from their bodies like shells. Some had 6 arms with sharp claws. Others had poison that could kill with one bite. All of them were much bigger and stronger than most other creatures in space. Lieutenant Dongsu walked up to the captain with a smile on his face that showed his sharp teeth. He was excited because their sensors had found a small human ship floating nearby. The ship looked tiny compared to their war vessel, like a mouse next to an elephant, Captain. "Look at this pathetic little ship," Dongsu said, pointing at the screen. "It has only one person inside and no weapons at all. These humans are supposed to be one of the newer species in our part of space, but they look so weak and helpless." The captain laughed, a deep sound that made the metal floor shake under their feet. He had heard stories about humans from other Corvan commanders. Most of the stories said humans were soft creatures who gave up easily when faced with real danger. They had no natural weapons like claws or poison. They had no thick skin or armor. They were just pink and squishy things that broke easily. "Send a message to that ship," Wu Jin ordered his communication officer. "Tell them to surrender now or we will destroy them. We need some entertainment today, and capturing weak aliens is always fun for the crew." The message was sent, and within seconds they got a reply. The human voice sounded calm and quiet, which surprised some of the bridge crew. Most aliens screamed or begged when they saw a Corvan warship, but this human just said okay and asked where he should put his ship. The bridge crew laughed loud and hard. They had never seen such an easy capture before. Even the weakest aliens usually tried to run or fight, but this human just gave up right away without any struggle. "Bring that ship into our docking bay," the captain ordered, "and send a full squad to collect the prisoner. I want to see what this human looks like up close. Maybe we can use him for target practice later." The small human ship was pulled into the huge docking bay by powerful machines. The bay was so big that 100 ships the same size could fit inside, with room to spare. When the human ship landed, it looked like a toy that had been dropped by a giant child. A squad of 12 Corvan soldiers marched to the human ship wearing their best armor and carrying their strongest weapons. They were all at least 8 feet tall, with muscles that could crush metal and teeth that could bite through stone. The squad leader, Major Taeho, was especially proud of his strength and had won many fighting contests. When the human ship door opened, a single figure stepped out. He was much smaller than any of the Corvan soldiers, maybe only 6 feet tall, with no visible armor or weapons. He had dark hair and was wearing simple clothes that looked like work uniforms. His hands were empty and raised in the air, to show he had no weapons. The Corvan soldiers stared at him for a moment, then burst into laughter. This was what they had been worried about. This tiny, soft creature was supposed to be dangerous. The human looked around the docking bay with what seemed like curiosity rather than fear, which made the soldiers laugh even harder. "What is your name, human?" Major Taeho demanded in his loudest voice that usually made prisoners shake with terror. "My name is Hyun Woo," the human replied in a quiet voice that did not shake at all. "I was carrying supplies to a research station when you found me. I do not want any trouble." The soldiers laughed again. One of them poked Hyun Woo with the end of his weapon just to see what would happen. The human stumbled a little but did not fall down or cry out in pain. He just stood there waiting to see what they would do next. "This is too easy," said another soldier named Corporal Namjoon. "These humans are even weaker than the stories said. Look at him. He is not even scared of us. Maybe humans do not have the brain power to understand when they are in danger." Major Taeho grabbed Hyun Woo by the arm to drag him toward the detention cells. The human did not resist or try to fight back. He just walked along, quietly looking around at the walls and ceiling, like he was interested in how the ship was built. The soldier found this behavior strange, but decided the human was probably too stupid to realize how much trouble he was in. The walk to the detention level took 15 minutes through long corridors filled with other Corvin soldiers. All of them stopped what they were doing to stare at the human prisoner and laugh at how small and weak he looked. Some made jokes about using him as a pet, or a toy. Others wondered if humans could even feel pain, the same way other aliens did. The detention cells were in the lowest part of the ship where the walls were thick and escape was impossible. Each cell had energy bars instead of metal ones that would kill anyone who touched them. The cells were designed for much larger prisoners, so when they put Hyunwoo inside, he had plenty of room to move around. "Look at this pathetic creature," Major Taeho said to the other prisoners who were all ready. "In nearby cells, we caught the most disappointing alien I have ever seen. He gave up without even trying to run away." There were 3 other prisoners in the detention area. A tall blue alien named Ji-ho, who had been a diplomat from some peaceful planet, and a young human woman named Soo-jin, who had been captured from a research station. The woman looked scared and had been crying, but the diplomat just looked sad and tired. The guards set up their posts outside the detention area and began making jokes about their new prisoner. They talked about how easy it had been to capture him and wondered if all humans were this weak and cowardly. One guard suggested they should just conquer all human planets right away, since the humans probably would not even fight back. What none of the Corvin soldiers knew was that their quiet prisoner was not just some random human carrying supplies. He was Master Sergeant Hyunwoo Park from the United States Marine Corps Force Reconnaissance Unit. Had been specially trained for the most dangerous missions in human space, and had completed 3 tours of duty in combat zones that would terrify most aliens. While the guards laughed and made jokes, Hyunwoo was carefully studying everything around him. He noted the guard rotation schedule, the energy pattern of the cell bars, the layout of the corridors they had walked through, and the weapons the soldiers carried. Every casual glance was actually gathering intelligence that he stored in his trained memory. His calm behavior was not fear or stupidity. It was the controlled readiness of a professional soldier who had been in much worse situations before. The Corvin soldiers thought they had captured a helpless victim, but they had actually invited a highly trained killer onto their ship as the guards settled in for what they thought would be easy duty, watching a harmless prisoner. Hyunwoo sat quietly in his cell and began planning something that would change everything. The soldiers had no idea that their biggest mistake was thinking humans were weak. 3 days passed since the Corvin soldiers had captured Hyunwoo, and they were having the time of their lives, treating him like some kind of amusing pet that they could poke and laugh at whenever they got bored. The guards would bring other crew members down to the detention level just to show off their pathetic human prisoner who never complained or fought back, no matter what they did to him. During mealtimes, the guards would throw the food into Hyunwoo's cell like he was some kind of animal at a zoo. They would make comments about how human food looked disgusting and wonder out loud if humans were actually smart enough to cook their meals properly. The other prisoners, Ji-ho and Soo-jin, watched these displays with growing concern, but Hyunwoo just ate quietly and thanked the guards politely for the food. The guards found his politeness both funny and confusing. Most prisoners either begged for mercy or screamed threats and curses, but this human just said, "Thank you," every time they did something mean to him. Corporal Namjoon started bringing other soldiers down just to see this strange behavior, because none of them had ever met an alien who acted this way when captured. On the second day, Commander Woo-jin himself came down to the detention level to get a close look at their human prisoner. He had heard the stories from his crew about how unusually calm and polite the creature was, and wanted to see for himself if the reports were true. The commander was a massive alien, even by Corvin standards, standing almost 9 feet tall with thick purple scales and arms that could crush steel. "So you are the famous human that my soldiers keep talking about," Commander Woo-jin said as he stood outside Hyunwoo's cell looking down at the much smaller figure sitting calmly on the metal bench inside. "I have to admit you are not what I expected when we first detected your ship." "What were you expecting, Sir?" Hyunwoo asked in his quiet voice that never seemed to show any fear or anger even when the guards were being cruel to him. The commander studied him carefully, looking for signs of hidden weapons or some kind of trick, but all he saw was an ordinary-looking human in simple clothes who seemed genuinely curious about the answer to his question. "I was expecting something more impressive," the commander replied honestly. Our intelligence reports said that humans were a warrior species that had fought many battles against other aliens in this part of space, but looking at you, I think our information might be wrong. Yunwu nodded thoughtfully as if this was an interesting piece of information that he had not heard before. What kind of battles have you heard about? He asked in the same calm tone that he used for everything. Commander Wu Jin laughed and began telling stories about the great Corvan military victories over dozens of different alien species. He described how their warriors were bred from birth to be perfect fighting machines, with natural armor and weapons that made them nearly impossible to defeat in combat. He talked about conquering entire star systems and capturing millions of prisoners who all begged for mercy. The other prisoners listened to these stories with growing horror, but Yunwu just nodded along like he was learning interesting facts about alien culture. He asked simple questions about Corvan military tactics and ship design that the commander found entertaining enough to answer in detail. The commander enjoyed having someone who seemed interested in hearing about their great victories. What the commander did not realize was that every question Hyunwoo asked was carefully chosen to gather specific intelligence about Corvan military capability, ship layouts, and security procedures. He was conducting a professional military debriefing disguised as casual conversation, and the aliens were giving him exactly the information he needed when the commander mentioned that their ship had conquered 15 different worlds in the past year. Hyunwoo asked innocent-sounding questions about how many ships were in the Corvan fleet and what kinds of weapons they used. The commander was happy to boast about their superior technology and firepower, never suspecting that he was giving away military secrets to an enemy intelligence operative. The guards also enjoyed showing off for their new audience. They demonstrated their strength by bending metal bars with their bare hands, and bragged about their speed and reflexes that were supposedly 3 times faster than most other species. They told stories about their training from childhood to become perfect soldiers, and how they had never lost a single battle against any. Enemy Corporal Nam Jun was especially proud of his combat record, and spent hours telling Hunwoo about all the different aliens he had defeated in personal combat. He described his weapons collection and his favorite fighting techniques while the human listened with what seemed like impressed admiration. The corporal never noticed that Hyunwoo was memorizing every detail about Corvan fighting methods and weaknesses. During these conversations, Hyunwoo learned that Corvan soldiers relied heavily on their natural strength and armor, but had very little training in tactical thinking or adapting to unexpected situations. They were used to overwhelming their enemies with brute force and had never developed strategies for dealing with opponents who used different fighting methods. He also discovered that the ship had several structural weaknesses that the crew did not consider important. The ventilation system connected to maintenance shafts throughout the vessel. The power systems had backup generators in predictable locations. The armory was guarded by only 2 soldiers during night shifts, and the locks were controlled by a central computer system. Most importantly, he learned about the crew schedules and routines. The guard rotations changed every 6 hours with a brief overlap period, where the detention level had minimal coverage. The bridge crew worked in shifts that left certain key positions understaffed during specific hours, and the ship security chief major, Taeho, had a habit of making personal inspections at the same time every day. The other prisoners began to notice that something was different about their fellow captive Ji-ho. The diplomat had been trained to observe body language and social cues, and he could tell that Hyunwoo was not as helpless as he appeared. Sujin, the young human engineer, was amazed at how calm he stayed, even when the guards were being cruel and threatening. "Why are you not scared?" Ji-ho whispered to Hyunwoo during one of the quiet periods when the guards were not paying attention. "These aliens have conquered dozens of worlds and killed millions of people, but you act like this is just a normal day." Hyunwoo smiled and gave the same answer he had been giving. "Everyone, I have faith that everything will work out the way it is supposed to. Sometimes the best strategy is to be patient and wait for the right opportunity." Sujin found this answer both comforting and mysterious. She could not understand how anyone could be so calm in such a dangerous situation, but something about Hyunwoo's confidence made her feel safer. The guards had threatened to kill all the prisoners if they caused any trouble, but Hyunwoo acted like he knew something they did, not what neither of the other prisoners knew was that Hyunwoo had been using his 3 days of captivity to conduct the most thorough intelligence-gathering operation of his military career. He now knew the complete layout of the ship, the strength and weaknesses of the crew, the location of weapons and supplies, and the daily routines that would give him the best opportunities to act. The Corvan soldiers thought they were having fun with a helpless prisoner, but they had actually spent 3 days teaching a highly trained military intelligence operative everything he needed to know to take control of their ship. The biggest mistake they made was assuming that quiet and polite meant weak and harmless. On the 4th night, Hyunwoo decided it was time to stop being a prisoner. The ship had settled into its normal routine, and the crew was relaxed and confident that their 3 captives were safely locked away in the detention cells. The guards had become lazy over the past few days because watching helpless prisoners was boring work, and nothing interesting ever happened during the night shift. Hyunwoo had spent 3 days carefully studying the energy bars that kept him locked in his cell. He noticed that every 43 minutes there was a brief fluctuation in the power that made the bars flicker, for less than 2 seconds. Most people would never notice such a small detail, but Marines were trained to observe everything and remember it perfectly. At exactly 2:30 in the morning during the guard rotation change, Hyunwoo moved into position near the energy bars. He had calculated the timing perfectly and knew that the next power fluctuation would happen in less than 1 minute. The corridor outside was empty because the new guards had not arrived yet and the old guards had already left their posts. When the energy bars flickered, Hyunwoo was ready. He slipped through the gap in exactly 1.5 seconds, moving with the smooth speed of someone who had practiced escaping from tight spaces hundreds of times during his military training. The bars flickered back to full power, just as his foot cleared the threshold, and anyone watching would have missed the entire escape. The detention level corridor was dark and quiet, with only emergency lighting to show the way Hyunwoo moved like a shadow, staying close to the walls and avoiding the areas where security cameras might detect movement. He had memorized the location of every camera during his 3 days of observation, and knew exactly where the blind spots were located. His destination was the ventilation system access panel that he had spotted near the end of the corridor. The panel was designed for maintenance robots and was much too small for most aliens to use. But Hyunwoo had trained in urban warfare, where soldiers sometimes had to move through drainage pipes and air ducts to avoid enemy detection. The ventilation shaft was barely wide enough for his shoulders, but he squeezed inside and began crawling through the metal tunnel system that connected different parts of the ship. He had memorized the layout from conversations with the guards and knew that the main shaft led directly to the armory section. 3 levels up, crawling through air ducts was uncomfortable and slow work. But Hyunwoo had done much worse things during his military service. He moved carefully to avoid making noise that might alert the crew and stopped frequently to listen for sounds that might indicate someone was nearby. The shaft was dark, but he navigated by touch and memory, like he had been trained to do. After 20 minutes of careful crawling, he reached the armory section and found another access panel that opened into a storage room next to the main weapons vault. The room was dark and empty, but he could see light coming from under the door that led to the armory itself. Hyunwoo opened the door just enough to peek into the armory and saw exactly what he had expected. 2 guards were sitting at a table playing some kind of card game and drinking something that smelled like alcohol. They were relaxed and laughing and not paying attention to their surroundings because they thought all the prisoners were safely locked up. The armory was filled with weapons that were far more advanced than anything humans had developed. But weapons were weapons, and Hyunwoo had been trained to use any kind of equipment he might find on a battlefield. He studied the room layout and the positions of the 2 guards, then made his plan, moving silently across the storage room floor. He positioned himself behind the first guard who was facing away from the door. The guard was a typical Corvan soldier, big and strong, but completely unprepared for an attack from someone he thought was locked in a cell. 3 levels below, Hyunwoo had learned exactly where to strike Corvan anatomy during his 3 days of observation. Aliens had thick scales that protected most of their body, but there were nerve clusters at the base of their neck that were vulnerable to precise pressure. The first guard never knew what hit him and collapsed unconsciously to the floor without making a sound. The second guard looked up from his cards just in time to see a human figure moving toward him with impossible speed. He tried to reach for his weapon, but Hyunwoo was already there, applying the same nerve cluster technique that had worked on his partner. Both guards were unconscious within 10 seconds and the armory was secure. Now Hyunwoo had access to an entire room full of advanced alien weapons and equipment. He selected items that were similar to human military gear, so he would know how to use them effectively. A plasma rifle that worked like the pulse weapons he had trained with explosive charges that could be rigged into grenades. A Corvin combat suit that he modified to fit his smaller human frame. He also found something even more valuable than weapons. The armory computer terminal contained detailed information about the ship layout, security systems, and crew assignments. This intelligence was worth more than any single weapon because it would allow him to plan his operations with complete knowledge of enemy positions and capabilities. Working quickly but carefully, Hyunwoo downloaded all the information he could access and began planning his next moves. The ship had a crew of over 200 soldiers, but most of them were asleep during the night shift. Only essential personnel were awake and they were scattered throughout the vessel in predictable patterns. His plan was simple but effective. He would work systematically through the ship, eliminating guards and taking control of key systems. The Corvin soldiers were used to fighting enemies who attacked them directly with superior numbers, but they had no experience dealing with a single opponent who used stealth and intelligence instead of brute force. The first target was the security control room where the night shift monitors watched the camera feeds and maintained communication with guard posts throughout the ship. If he could take control of the security systems, he would be able to move freely without being detected, and could even use the ship's own equipment against the crew. Hyunwoo left the unconscious guards in the armory and began moving through the ship's corridors using his new knowledge of the layout. To avoid patrols and security cameras, he moved like a professional soldier who had done this kind of work many times before, staying in the shadows and striking only when he had perfect tactical advantage. The security control room was located 2 levels above the armory and was staffed by a single operator who was watching entertainment videos instead of monitoring the camera feeds. The operator never saw Hyunwoo enter the room and was unconscious before he realized there was any danger now. Hyunwoo had control of the ship's security systems and could see exactly where every crew member was located throughout the vessel. He could also control the lighting power systems and communication networks, which would give him tremendous advantages in the battles to come. Looking at the security monitors, he could see that the rest of the crew was still going about their normal routines, completely unaware that their ship had been infiltrated by an enemy operative. The guards at their posts were relaxed and inattentive. The bridge crew was focused on navigation and routine maintenance. What they did not know was that their easy prisoner had escaped and was now armed with their own weapons, had access to their security systems, and possessed complete intelligence about their ship and crew. A trained Marine had turned their supposedly secure vessel into his personal battlefield, and they had no idea what was about to happen to them. The first sign that something was wrong came at 4 a.m. when Security Chief Major Taeho failed to respond to his routine check-in call from the bridge. The communication officer tried 3 times to reach him but got only silence, which was unusual because Taeho was known for being very reliable about following procedures. Captain Woo Jin was not too concerned at first because equipment sometimes malfunctioned, and communication problems were not uncommon on old ships like theirs. But when they tried to contact the armory guards and the security control room and got no response from any of them, he began to worry that something serious might be happening. "Send a patrol to check on the security section," the captain ordered. Lieutenant Dong-soo, who was the duty officer for the night shift, "Take 4 soldiers with you and find out why we cannot reach any of our people down there. This could be a system malfunction, but we need to be sure." Lieutenant Dong-soo selected 4 of his best soldiers and headed toward the security section, expecting to find some kind of equipment failure, or maybe guards who had fallen asleep at their posts. What he found instead was something that made no sense at all. The security control room was dark and empty with no sign of the operator who was supposed to be on duty. The armory was even more confusing, because the 2 guards were lying unconscious on the floor, but there were no obvious injuries and no signs of a struggle. The weapons racks looked like they had been disturbed and some equipment was missing, but whoever had taken it had been very careful not to damage anything else. This does not make sense. one of the soldiers said as he checked the pulse of one unconscious. "Guard, these men are alive, but they will not wake up. It looks like they were attacked by someone who knew exactly how to disable them, without killing them." Lieutenant Dongsu felt a chill run down his spine as he realized what this might mean. Someone had infiltrated their ship and taken weapons from the armory. But who could possibly have done such a thing? The only prisoners were 3 helpless aliens locked in detention cells, and all the crew members were accounted for. Check the detention level. He ordered 2 of his soldiers while he stayed to examine the armory. "Go make sure all the prisoners are still in their cells and report back immediately." The 2 soldiers hurried toward the detention level, but they never made it there. Hyunwoo had been watching them through the security cameras and was waiting in a corridor that they had to pass through. He struck from the shadows using techniques that the aliens had never seen before. Both soldiers were unconscious before they could raise an alarm back in the armory. Lieutenant Dongsu was getting more nervous as time passed without hearing from his men. He tried to contact them through their communication devices but got no response, just like what had happened with the other missing guards. Something was very wrong on this ship, and he was starting to suspect that they were dealing with more than just equipment failures. "We need to get back to the bridge and report this to the captain," he told his remaining 2 soldiers. "Stay close together and watch for anything unusual. I think we might have an intruder on board." But as they tried to leave the armory section, they discovered that the lights in the corridor had been turned off, and the passage was completely dark. Their flashlights showed only empty hallways, but something felt wrong about the darkness, like there were eyes watching them from places they could not see. One of the soldiers stepped forward to scout ahead, but he never came back. The other soldier went to look for him and also vanished into the darkness. Lieutenant Dongsu found himself alone in the armory with no idea what had happened to his men, and no way to contact the bridge because his communication device had stopped working. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Captain Wu Jin was receiving reports from other parts of the ship that made him realize they were facing a serious crisis. Guard posts throughout the vessel were failing to respond to check-in calls. Security cameras were going dark. One by one, patrols that were sent to investigate were disappearing without trace sound. The general alarm, the captain ordered his bridge crew and wake up all off-duty personnel. "I want every soldier on this ship armed and ready for battle. We have an intruder aboard, and I want them found and captured immediately." The alarm bells rang throughout the ship, and hundreds of Corvan soldiers rushed to their battle stations expecting to face some kind of boarding party or invasion force. But when they reached their assigned positions, they found nothing except empty corridors and darkness. The enemy they were looking for was nowhere to be seen. What they did not realize was that their enemy was everywhere, using the ship's own systems against them. Hyunwoo had complete control of the security network and could see exactly where every soldier was going. He could turn lights on and off to create confusion, cut power to certain sections, and even play false messages through the communication system. Groups of soldiers found themselves separated from their units when doors locked unexpectedly, or when they received orders that sent them in different directions. They wandered through dark corridors looking for an enemy who seemed to be able to appear and disappear like a ghost, striking without warning and vanishing before they could respond. The Corvan soldiers had trained for many different kinds of combat, but they had never faced an opponent who used psychological warfare and guerrilla tactics against them. They were used to fighting enemies who attacked them directly in open battle, but this intruder seemed to be playing by completely different rules. Fear began to spread through the crew as more and more soldiers disappeared into the darkness. Some were found unconscious like the original guards, but others simply vanished completely. The soldiers who remained started jumping at shadows and shooting at anything that moved, which caused them to accidentally damage their own ship systems. Captain Wu Jin realized that his crew was starting to panic and that panic would make them even more vulnerable to whatever was hunting them. He tried to restore order by giving clear commands and organizing systematic search patterns, but his orders were being undermined by false messages that sent his soldiers in the wrong directions. The intruder was not just physically superior to his expectations, but was also waging war against their minds. The fear and confusion were spreading faster than any weapon could have, and the mighty Corvan warriors were being defeated by their own imagination as much as by their mysterious enemy. In the detention level, Su Jin and Ji Ho huddled in their cells, listening to the alarm. bells and wondering what was happening. The guards who usually watched them had disappeared hours ago, and they could hear the sounds of soldiers running through corridors and shouting orders to each other. "Where do you think Hyunwoo is?" Soo-jin whispered to Jiho, who was in the next cell. "Do you think he is safe?" Jiho looked at the empty guard posts and the open door that led to the corridor beyond. Then he looked at Hyunwoo's cell, which still appeared to be occupied by a sleeping figure under the blankets. But something about the shape under the blankets did not look quite right. "I think," Jiho said slowly, "that our quiet friend is much more dangerous than any of us realized. And I think the Corvin soldiers are about to learn that humans are not the weak species they thought we were." By dawn, the mighty Corvin warship had become a nightmare for its own crew. Captain Woo-jin sat in his command chair trying to make sense of reports that seemed impossible to believe. In less than 6 hours, they had lost over half their soldiers to a single intruder who moved through their ship like he owned it. The reports from surviving soldiers all told the same impossible story. Their enemy appeared out of nowhere, struck with deadly precision, then vanished before they could fight back. He seemed to know exactly where they would be and what they would do before they did it. Every trap they set was turned against them. Every ambush they planned was anticipated and countered. "How is this possible?" Captain Woo-jin demanded from his remaining officers. "We have the best warriors in the galaxy aboard this ship. How can one alien be defeating hundreds of our soldiers?" Nobody had an answer because nothing like this had ever happened before in Corvin military history. Their enemies usually attacked them with fleets of ships or armies of soldiers, but they had never faced a single opponent who could systematically dismantle their forces while remaining essentially invisible. Lieutenant Dong-soo, who had barely escaped from the armory section, tried to explain what they were dealing with, but his words sounded crazy even to himself. "This intruder fights like no alien we have ever encountered," he said. "His tactics are completely different from anything in our military database. He does not try to overpower us with strength, instead he uses our own systems and psychology against us." The bridge crew could see evidence of this strange warfare on their security monitors. The few cameras that still worked showed corridors that had been turned into mazes by selectively cutting power to certain sections. Emergency lighting flickered in patterns that created confusion and disorientation. Blast doors opened and closed at unexpected times, separating soldiers from their units. Even more disturbing were the sounds coming through the communication system. Strange noises echoed through the corridors that made soldiers jump at shadows. Voices spoke in languages they could not understand, giving orders that contradicted their real. Commander's false alarm sent rescue teams to empty rooms while real emergencies went unnoticed. Captain Woo-jin decided to take direct action to end this crisis. He activated the ship-wide communication system and spoke to every remaining soldier aboard the vessel. "Listen carefully," he announced in his most commanding voice. "I know you are afraid, but we are still Corvin warriors, and we do not surrender to anyone." He paused to let his words sink in, then continued. "We will gather all remaining personnel on the bridge where we can defend ourselves properly. Once we are together, this intruder will have to face us in direct combat, where our superior numbers and firepower will give us victory." But even as he spoke the words, Captain Woo-jin felt doubt creeping into his mind. If this enemy was so skilled at avoiding direct confrontation, what made him think that forcing a battle would work in their favor? Still, it was the only plan he could think of that might give them a chance. The remaining soldiers began moving toward the bridge, but they never made it. Hyunwoo had heard the captain's announcement and was ready for the response. He had spent the night learning every detail of the ship layout and had prepared multiple contingency plans for different scenarios. As groups of soldiers moved through the corridors, they found themselves facing obstacles that seemed designed specifically to stop them. Doors that should have been open were sealed shut. Passages that should have been clear were blocked by debris that had not been there an hour earlier. Life support systems failed in certain sections, forcing the soldiers to take longer routes that led them into carefully prepared ambushes. The few soldiers who managed to reach the bridge found that their journey had cost them dearly. Many of their comrades had been lost along the way, and those who survived were exhausted and demoralized. They had been reduced from a mighty army to a handful of frightened survivors hiding Behind blast doors, Captain Wu Jin looked at his remaining crew and realized that his plan had backfired. Instead of concentrating his forces for a final battle, he had allowed the enemy to pick them off in small groups until almost nothing was left. The bridge that was supposed to be their stronghold now felt like a trap, but the worst part was the waiting. They could see on their monitors that someone was moving through their ship, but they could never get a clear view of their enemy. All they saw were shadows and shapes that appeared and disappeared too quickly to identify. The psychological pressure was almost unbearable. Then the lights on the bridge went out. In the darkness, they heard a voice speaking calmly and clearly in perfect Corvan language. "Captain Wu Jin," the voice said, "I think it is time we talked. You have lost this battle, and continuing to fight will only result in more casualties for your crew." "Who are you?" the captain demanded into the darkness. "Where are you hiding, and what do you want from us?" "My name is Master Sergeant Hyun Woo Park, United States Marine Corps," the voice replied. "I am the prisoner you captured 3 days ago, the one your soldiers thought was weak and harmless." "This is impossible," Captain Wu Jin shouted. "You are just a human. How could you defeat our entire crew? You have no weapons, no training, no experience in warfare." The lights came back on, and the bridge crew found themselves face to face with their enemy for the first time. He stood in front of the main view screen wearing a modified Corvan combat suit and carrying weapons taken from their own armory. But what shocked them most was his calm, confident expression that showed no fear at all. "I have training," Captain Hyun Woo said quietly, "more training than you can imagine. And I have experience in kinds of warfare that your people have never encountered. Your soldiers are strong and brave, but they fight like warriors from 1,000 years ago. They have no understanding of modern military science." He gestured to the monitors showing the empty corridors throughout their ship. "Your people rely on brute force and intimidation, but those tactics do not work against someone who has been trained to think 3 steps ahead of the enemy. Every move you made I anticipated, every trap you set I turned against you." Captain Wu Jin stared at the human who had destroyed his ship and his crew, trying to understand how someone so small could be so dangerous. "But your species is supposed to be weak," he said. "We have conquered 17 different worlds, and none of them had warriors like you." Hyun-woo smiled, an expression that was somehow both friendly and terrifying. "You made the mistake of thinking that all humans are the same," he said. "You captured a civilian transport and expected to find a helpless victim instead. You found a Marine. And Marines are very good at turning bad situations into victories." The captain looked around at his few surviving crew members and realized that they had lost more than just a battle. They had lost their understanding of what humans were capable of. This single enemy had proven that their intelligence about human military capabilities was completely wrong. Captain Wu Jin stood on his own bridge, surrounded by his few remaining crew members, and stared at the human who had single-handedly destroyed his mighty warship. The alien commander had spent his entire life believing that Corvan warriors were the strongest fighters in the galaxy, but now he faced the terrible realization that he had been completely wrong about human capabilities. "You want to know what humans are really like?" Hyun-woo said as he kept his weapon trained on the bridge crew, but did not fire. "I will show you something that your intelligence reports never mentioned." He activated the ship's communication system and sent a signal toward human space using frequencies that the Corvans had never detected before. Within minutes, responses came back from a dozen different locations. Human military vessels, patrol ships, and defensive stations all answered the call with professional efficiency. "This is Master Sergeant Park requesting immediate assistance at these coordinates." Hyun-woo spoke into the communicator. "I have captured a Corvan warship and require backup to secure the vessel and prisoners." The responses that came back made the alien crew realize just how badly they had underestimated human military organization. Commodore Minho of the Earth Defense Force acknowledged the message and reported that 3 human battlecruisers were already moving toward their position. Admiral Su Jin of the Colonial Marines confirmed that a full battalion of assault troops was being prepared for deployment, but the message that terrified the aliens most came from General Jae-ho of Human Special Operations, who spoke directly to Hyun-woo through the communication system. "Outstanding work, Sergeant," the general said. "Your mission intelligence will be invaluable for our upcoming operations against Corvan positions. Captain Wu Jin felt his blood turn cold as he realized the truth. This had not been a random capture of an innocent human transport ship. This human had been on an intelligence mission when they found him, and everything that had happened since then had been part of a larger military operation. "You were never really a prisoner, were you?" the captain asked, in a voice that shook with the understanding of how completely he had been fooled. Hyunwoo shook his head with a slight smile. "I was exactly what I appeared to be," he said, "a United States Marine carrying out my mission. The only difference is that my mission changed when you captured me. Instead of gathering intelligence from a distance, I got to study your ship and crew from the inside." He gestured toward the security monitors that showed the empty corridors and unconscious soldiers scattered throughout the vessel. "Your people made this possible by assuming that humans are weak and helpless. You gave me 3 days to learn everything about your ship, your tactics, and your weaknesses. You told me military secrets because you thought I was too stupid to understand their importance." The alien captain looked around his ruined command center and tried to comprehend the scale of his defeat. A single human had infiltrated his ship, eliminated most of his crew, and captured intelligence that would probably doom the entire Corvan military campaign. Everything they had believed about human capabilities had been proven wrong in the most devastating way possible. Lieutenant Dong-Su, who had survived the night by staying on the bridge, spoke up in a whisper. "How many more like you are there?" he asked. "What kind of military force does your species really have?" Yunwoo considered the question seriously before answering. "The United States Marine Corps has about 200,000 active personnel," he said. "And we are just one branch of human military forces. There are millions more soldiers, sailors, and airmen serving in various capacities." The numbers hit the surviving Corvans like physical blows. They had attacked what they thought was a weak species, but had actually started a war with a civilization that had millions of trained warriors. The intelligence reports that had guided their invasion plans were not just wrong, they were catastrophically incorrect. Your empire made decisions based on false information. Hyunwoo, continued Marines are not even our strongest soldiers. We specialize in rapid deployment and reconnaissance. There are human forces that are much more heavily armed and experienced in large-scale warfare. Captain Wu Jin slumped in his command chair. As the full implications became clear, his species had planned to conquer human space with the same tactics they had used against other aliens. But humans were not like other aliens. They had professional military forces that were trained specifically for interspecies warfare. The communication system crackled again, and Admiral Sujin's voice came through the speakers. "Sergeant Park, this is Admiral Sujin. We have received your intelligence data, and it confirms our worst fears about Corvan military preparations. How much time do we have before their main fleet arrives?" Yunwoo checked the captured ship records on the bridge computer. "Based on their operational timeline, I estimate 6 weeks before the invasion fleet reaches human space. But we now have their complete battle plans, fleet positions, and communication codes. This intelligence should give us significant tactical advantages." "Excellent work, Sergeant," the Admiral replied. "The data you have provided will save countless human lives and probably determine the outcome of this war. You have given us exactly what we need to defend our colonies." The surviving Corvan crew listened to this exchange with growing horror. They understood that their great invasion fleet was probably doomed because a single human had captured all their military secrets. The warrior species that was supposed to conquer the galaxy had been completely outmaneuvered by people they had thought were helpless. Captain Wu Jin made one final attempt to salvage something from this disaster. "What do you want from us?" he asked Hyunwoo. "Will you kill us all, or do you have some other plan?" Hyunwoo lowered his weapon slightly but kept it ready. "I am a soldier, not a murderer," he said. "You and your surviving crew will be treated as prisoners of war according to human military regulations. You will be given medical treatment, food, and shelter until this conflict is resolved." But he added with a serious expression that made even the tough alien captain nervous, "I need you to send a message to your empire. Tell them exactly what happened here. Tell them that they attacked a species that has warriors who are very good at their job." The message that went out to Corvan space that day changed everything. The proud empire that had conquered 17 worlds learned that they had made a terrible mistake by underestimating humans. They had captured what they thought was a helpless victim, but had actually given a highly trained military operative complete access to their most sensitive information. When human battlecruisers arrived to collect their marine and secure the captured vessel, they found Hyun-woo calmly waiting with his prisoners properly secured and detailed intelligence reports already prepared. The professional efficiency of the rescue operation impressed even the defeated Corvins, who finally understood what kind of military force they had challenged. The story of Master Sergeant Hyun-woo Park spread throughout the galaxy within weeks, becoming a legend that was told in both human and alien space. For humans, it was proof that their military training and tactics could overcome any advantage in size or strength. For aliens, it became a warning that appearances could be deceiving, and that some species were much more dangerous than they seemed. The Corvin invasion never happened because the intelligence captured from one ship revealed the locations and plans of their entire fleet. Human forces were able to intercept and defeat the invasion force before it reached human space, saving millions of lives and establishing humanity as a major military power in galactic politics. And it all started because some alien soldiers thought they had captured a harmless human prisoner, without realizing that they were dealing with a United States Marine who was very, very good at his job.